Hello, podcast listeners. Today we're going to talk about the truth about dissociation. So before we do, I want to encourage you, as always, please subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. Please share this episode with a friend and please give me a wonderful 5-star review. Okay, here we go. Shame kills its host slowly, as well as those around her, because shame makes us dissociate. We lose the ability to feel our feelings, which includes empathy. Oftentimes, the only person we can feel any empathy for is ourselves. Shame is self-contempt, and we unconsciously project it onto those around us, convinced that they despise us. We feel rejected by them. Then deflect the shame that this creates back onto them. I did this with my daughter, Edie, starting when she was 11 years old, when I fell into a shame-based depressive episode. And I was convinced she hated me. My shame made me pathetic, desperate for her to make me feel loved, and I became needy. When she pushed away from me, I felt despised by her. I raged at her, deflecting my shame onto her. This went on for about 5 years, and it was horrible for both of us. During this time, I could only feel empathy for me, not her. At one point, she wrote me a letter, desperate for me to understand her. When I read it, I wasn't able to understand her point of view. All I could see was my own, and all I could feel was my pain, denying hers. I became a monster because I had no empathy. Anxiety and depression are dissociative states, which prohibit our ability to empathize with others, as dissociation quashes all feelings. This explains why so many people seem to lack empathy. Have you noticed this? Recently, when I was traveling, I got stuck in the TSA line, and my bag was pulled aside to rummage through just as my flight was boarding. There were 2 bags before me, and the TSA woman was taking her sweet time. I started to panic, and I tried to let her know my dilemma, asking her to show mercy and please prioritize my bag so I didn't miss my flight. The look in her eyes was flat and unresponsive. She said exactly what I imagined she would. "We'll get to your bag as soon as we can." I begged her to enlist another person to help move things along, but she showed no empathy and presented as utterly dissociative. It's a miracle I made my flight. Unfortunately, I have found this woman to be emblematic of so many people, including those in my own life. A few years ago, my husband and I traveled to Italy, actually, to travel with friends. When we arrived, they had already been there for a few days and had acclimated to the time change. That first night, I hardly slept due to jet lag, and I woke up in that morning with a severe sore throat. I asked the friends to please push back our itinerary to leave later so I could sleep more to recuperate. The man, Bob, called me high maintenance, insinuating that I was being manipulative. He showed no compassion for me, but finally listened to his wife, who did understand and show mercy. When I zoom out and take into consideration the big picture, I'm aware that Bob suffers from a lot of unprocessed shame from his childhood, and he shows signs of chronic depression. I shouldn't be surprised by his lack of ability to empathize. As much as I want to hate Bob, I've been Bob. when I was under the influence of shame. There was a time where my depression was so severe, I couldn't feel anything, especially empathy. I recall one instance where a woman was opening up to me about her daughter and she started to cry. Even though I knew she just needed my compassion, I panicked and I thought to myself, oh my God, get me out of here. I knew I could not give her what she needed, which was empathy. And all I could think about was me and how I was failing her, which compounded my shame. While she was crying, I was ashamed to feel nothing, which is exactly what I felt. I know my experience is not uncommon. It is why so many people avoid even having authentic conversations because they're terrified that someone else could open up and they would have to empathize, which they can't do due to their own dissociation. In therapy grad school, we were taught about dissociative states such as dissociative identity disorder, depersonalization, and dissociative fugue. But we were not taught that everyday disorders such as anxiety and depression are also dissociative states, nor were we taught how all of these are caused in large part by shame. All addictions also serve as a source of dissociation, where we flee from our shameful feelings. I've had parents tell me that the minute their child gets off the screen, they show signs of depression. That's because they are no longer able to dissociate from the shame. People who are dissociative are not bright because it's impossible to have intuition when we have cut ourselves off from our feelings. They have what I call shame brain. While they might be sharp in their area of expertise, they're terrible with reading the room and they make very wrong projections. Like I did with my daughter, they will project their self-contempt onto others, believing people despise them who do not. They will create a delusional construct for themselves and reality where they see themselves always as an innocent victim and others are always in the wrong. Carl Jung called this projection of our shadow because our unconscious mind cannot tolerate shame. It projects it onto those around us in efforts to no longer feel it. The frightening thing is we believe and convince ourselves that our delusions, our delusional construct of reality is true. People with the most shame become monsters because they have no empathy for others and because they are perpetually spinning this false narrative. They need a scapegoat to project their hatred upon. They are oftentimes paranoid, believing people are out to get them when nothing could be further from the truth. But shame also creates monsters out of all of us to some degree because it blocks our ability to have empathy and to trust our gut. It makes people like the TSA woman unable to respond to a traveler entreating her to show mercy. It makes people misinterpret distress for manipulation, like Bob. It precludes parents from hearing the desperation in a letter from their child who is attempting to be understood, like yours truly. Shame doesn't just rob others of our empathy, it robs us of ourselves. Being dissociative is not fully alive, but half dead. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who we truly are. Shame prevents this, thwarting the journey to become our true self and truly alive. Maybe the solution to fighting monsters, including the one inside us, is to kill shame. Shame is the common enemy. It robs, it lies, it destroys. It divides us from one another, ravaging families and communities. Let's unite against our enemy together, not allowing it to deceive and divide us. Love is the antidote, and killing shame is the solution. So if you have not already done this for yourselves, please go back to a past episode that I published back in June called What Kills Empathy. And please listen, especially to the second half of that episode where I lead listeners in an exercise to dislodge shame for ourselves. And again, as always, please share this with a friend. Please subscribe to this podcast and give me a great review. Thank you today for listening, dear listener.